When we step onto the scale and watch the numbers descend, there should be a moment of quiet triumph. The commitment we've made to ourselves, the adjustments we've woven into our daily rhythms, the times we've chosen differently, all of this manifests in those declining digits. And yet, when we stand before the mirror, when we notice how our clothes fit around the middle, when we catch our reflection from the side, something puzzling remains. The weight has diminished. The scale confirms this reality, but the belly, that persistent, stubborn accumulation around our center, seems almost unchanged, as though it exists in a separate universe governed by different laws. This phenomenon troubles many who embark on the journey toward a lighter, healthier self. It creates a peculiar kind of frustration, one that mingles achievement with disappointment. We find ourselves in this strange territory where progress is both evident and invisible, where success and stagnation occupy the same body simultaneously. To understand this paradox, we must venture into the intricate landscape of human metabolism, the architecture of fat storage, and the profound ways our bodies respond to the forces of change we impose upon them. Fat, in its essence, is not simply weight. It is not merely substance occupying space beneath our skin. Fat represents stored energy, yes, but it is also a living, metabolically active tissue with its own hormonal language, its own patterns of communication with the rest of our biological systems. When we think of losing weight, we often imagine a simple equation: consume fewer calories than we expend, and the body, finding itself in deficit, will draw upon its reserves. This is true in the broadest sense, but the reality of which reserves get accessed, in what order, and with what reluctance or eagerness, reveals a far more nuanced story. The human body stores fat in different compartments, and these compartments behave with remarkable independence from one another. There is subcutaneous fat, the kind that sits just beneath the skin, the fat we can pinch between our fingers on our arms, our thighs, our faces. Then there is visceral fat, the deeper variety that wraps around our internal organs, nestled in the abdominal cavity, invisible from the outside but metabolically powerful. And within even these categories, there exist regional variations. Fat cells in different locations respond differently to the same hormonal signals, the same dietary changes, the same exercise patterns. Consider how weight loss often announces itself first in the face. People notice their cheekbones emerging, their jawline becoming more defined, the slight hollowing around the eyes. The hands may become more defined, the wrist smaller, the wedding ring looser. The legs might slim, the arms lose some of their soft padding. All the while, the midsection, particularly in certain individuals, seems to hold fast to its reserves with a determination that feels almost personal, almost willful. This is not imagination. This is biology expressing its preferences, its priorities, its ancient programming. The explanation begins with understanding that fat cells are not passive storage units. They are endocrine organs in miniature, producing hormones and signaling molecules that influence metabolism, inflammation, appetite, and even mood. Visceral fat, the kind that tends to accumulate in the belly region, is particularly active in this regard. It releases fatty acids directly into the portal circulation, which flows straight to the liver, influencing the liver's metabolism of fats and sugars. It secretes inflammatory compounds called cytokines. It interacts with our stress response systems in ways that subcutaneous fat in other regions does not. When we create a caloric deficit through diet or increase our energy expenditure through movement, our bodies must decide which fat stores to mobilize first. This decision is not made democratically. It is not proportional. Instead, it follows patterns established by genetics, hormones, stress levels, sleep quality, age, and even the specific type of weight loss approach we've undertaken. For many people, particularly those whose bodies have favored visceral fat accumulation, the abdominal region becomes the last fortress, the final territory to yield. Part of this stubbornness relates to cortisol, our primary stress hormone. Cortisol has a complex relationship with fat storage, but one of its consistent effects is promoting the accumulation of visceral fat in the abdominal region. When we undergo weight loss, especially rapid weight loss or weight loss, accompanied by significant caloric restriction, our bodies interpret this as a form of stress. Even positive changes can trigger stress responses. The body, in its wisdom born of millennia facing unpredictable food supplies, releases cortisol as part of its adaptation to what it perceives as scarcity. This creates a peculiar circularity. We restrict calories to lose weight, which increases cortisol, which preferentially preserves or even continues building abdominal fat stores even as fat elsewhere diminishes. The very act of trying to lose belly fat can, under certain conditions, make it more difficult to lose belly fat. This is not failure of willpower or dedication. This is physiology doing what physiology has been refined to do over countless generations: protect what it deems most essential to survival. Sleep enters this conversation with surprising importance. When we sleep poorly or insufficiently, our hormonal balance shifts in ways that favor abdominal fat retention. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, increases. Leptin, the satiety hormone, decreases. Insulin sensitivity deteriorates, meaning our cells become less responsive to insulin signals, leading to higher circulating insulin levels. Insulin is a storage hormone, and elevated insulin levels promote fat storage, particularly in the visceral compartment. Moreover, poor sleep elevates cortisol, adding another layer to the stress-related fat retention we've already discussed. There exists, too, the matter of gender and age. Women, particularly after menopause when estrogen levels decline, often experience a shift in fat distribution patterns. Estrogen, among its many roles, influences where fat is preferentially stored. Higher estrogen tends to promote subcutaneous fat storage in the hips and thighs, the gynoid or pear-shaped pattern. When estrogen declines, this protective effect diminishes, and fat distribution begins to favor the abdominal region, more characteristic of male pattern storage. A woman who has successfully lost weight may find, to her frustration, that her body now stores its remaining fat differently than it once did, regardless of the scale's reading. Men, meanwhile, have always tended towards central fat accumulation, but as testosterone declines with age, this tendency often intensifies. Testosterone helps maintain lean muscle mass and influences fat distribution. Lower testosterone correlates with increased visceral fat accumulation. The man who could once lose a few pounds quickly and see his abdomen flatten may find, as decades accumulate, that the same strategies produce different, more partial results. The type of exercise we engage in also matters profoundly. Cardiovascular exercise, long duration, moderate intensity activity burns calories and contributes to overall fat loss, but it does not preferentially target visceral fat. And in some cases, excessive cardio without adequate recovery can elevate cortisol chronically, potentially working against abdominal fat loss even as total body weight decreases. Resistance training, the building and maintaining of muscle mass, creates metabolic changes that extend beyond the exercise session itself. Muscle tissue requires energy for maintenance, increasing our baseline metabolic rate. More importantly, resistance training improves insulin sensitivity, helping cells respond more effectively to insulin signals, which reduces the hormonal environment that favors abdominal fat storage. Yet even with optimal exercise, proper sleep, and well-structured nutrition, some individuals will still experience this pattern of losing weight while retaining belly fat, at least initially. This speaks to the timeline of fat loss, which is rarely uniform. The body does not reduce all fat deposits proportionally as weight decreases. Instead, it follows its own sequence, often mobilizing peripheral subcutaneous fat more readily before accessing the central, visceral stores. This means that patience becomes not just a virtue but a physiological necessity. The belly fat may indeed be responsive to the changes being made, but it may be last in line, waiting its turn after other fat stores have been sufficiently depleted. There is something profound in recognizing that our bodies carry not just our current circumstances but the echoes of our histories. The person who has repeatedly cycled through weight loss and regain What researchers call weight cycling or yo-yo dieting has taught their body particular lessons. With each cycle, the body may become more efficient at storing fat when food becomes abundant again, more reluctant to release it when restriction returns. The metabolic adaptations that occur are not mere stubbornness, but intelligent responsiveness to perceived environmental instability. The body that has learned to expect feast and famine becomes expert at holding onto resources when it can, and the abdomen, being a prime storage site for quick access energy, becomes the stronghold. Inflammation weaves through this entire tapestry. Visceral fat, as we've noted, secretes inflammatory compounds. The inflammation can also promote further visceral fat accumulation, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Chronic low-grade inflammation can stem from many sources: poor diet quality, even within appropriate caloric amounts, insufficient omega-3 fatty acids, excessive omega-6 fatty acids, food sensitivities, gut microbiome imbalances, chronic stress, environmental toxins, or systemic conditions. When inflammation persists, it interferes with normal metabolic signaling, promotes insulin resistance, and creates a metabolic environment where abdominal fat is preserved even as overall weight decreases. The gut microbiome itself deserves consideration in this puzzle. The trillions of bacteria inhabiting our digestive system influence how we extract energy from food, how we store fat, how we experience inflammation, and even how our hunger and satiety hormones function. Certain bacterial profiles have been associated with obesity and particularly with visceral adiposity. When we change our diet to lose weight, we change the environment our gut bacteria inhabit, but these populations shift more slowly than the scale moves. The microbiome may still be calibrated for a heavier body even as that body grows lighter, potentially influencing where remaining fat is stored and how readily it's released. We must also acknowledge the genetic dimension. Some people are simply more predisposed to central fat accumulation than others. There are genetic variants that influence fat distribution, metabolic rate, insulin sensitivity, and stress hormone regulation. This is not determinism. Genes are not destiny, but they are influential. Two people following identical diet and exercise protocols may experience notably different patterns of fat loss, not because one is more dedicated or disciplined, but because their genetic backgrounds have shaped different metabolic landscapes. Understanding this can be liberating rather than discouraging. It shifts the conversation from moral failure to biological reality. The person whose belly fat persists while weight declines is not doing something wrong. They are navigating the complex interaction of their unique physiology with the environmental and behavioral changes they're implementing. The solution is not self-judgment, but refined strategy, patience, and comprehensive support for the metabolic processes that govern fat distribution. This brings us to the question of what can be done when the scale moves but the belly does not. The answer is rarely a single intervention, but rather a systems approach that addresses multiple factors simultaneously. Supporting sleep quality becomes paramount, establishing consistent sleep and wake times, creating environments conducive to deep rest, managing light exposure, addressing sleep disorders if present, managing stress through practices that actually lower cortisol, meditation, time in nature, social connection, activities that induce genuine relaxation rather than mere distraction becomes not peripheral but central to the physical goal. Nutritional quality matters beyond calories, emphasizing whole foods, adequate protein to preserve lean muscle during weight loss, sufficient fiber to support gut health and stable blood sugar, anti-inflammatory fats like those from fatty fish, nuts, seeds, and olive oil. These choices shape the hormonal and inflammatory environment in ways that support visceral fat mobilization. Severely restricting calories may move the scale faster initially, but moderate, sustainable deficits that preserve metabolic health often prove more effective for changing body composition, including abdominal fat, over the longer term. Strength training, as mentioned, creates metabolic effects that support the specific goal of reducing visceral fat, not merely through calorie burning but through improved insulin sensitivity, and hormonal optimization. High-intensity interval training, when performed appropriately for an individual's fitness level and with adequate recovery, can also influence visceral fat more directly than steady-state cardio alone, though both have their place in a comprehensive approach. There may also be medical factors to investigate: thyroid function, sex hormone levels, cortisol patterns throughout the day, inflammatory markers, metabolic health indicators like fasting insulin and hemoglobin A1C. These can reveal underlying conditions that make abdominal fat particularly resistant to change. Addressing these, whether through medical treatment or targeted lifestyle interventions, can remove obstacles that no amount of dietary restriction or exercise alone could overcome. What emerges from this exploration is a picture of remarkable complexity. The human body, in its wisdom, does not treat all fat equally. It prioritizes, it sequences, it responds to a symphony of signals that include but extend far beyond the simple mathematics of calories. When we lose weight but not belly fat, we are witnessing this complexity in action. We are seeing the body make choices about which resources to release and which to preserve, choices shaped by hormones, stress, sleep, age, genetics, inflammation, and metabolic history. There is something humbling in this recognition, something that invites us to approach our bodies with curiosity rather than frustration, with partnership rather than antagonism. The belly fat that persists is not enemy territory, but rather communication, our body telling us something about its current state, its needs, its protective mechanisms. Listening to this communication, responding to it with comprehensive support rather than mere restriction, often yields results that force alone cannot achieve. The journey toward health, we discover, is not actually about dominating the body into submission, but about creating conditions where the body feels safe enough, supported enough, balanced enough to release what it no longer needs. The belly fat held in reserve is not stubbornness but ancient wisdom, and addressing it requires honoring that wisdom while providing new information, new signals that safety and abundance exist, that holding on to emergency reserves is no longer necessary. In time, with patience and comprehensive approach, the belly does yield for most people. The visceral fat mobilizes. The waist circumference decreases. But this happens on the body's timeline, not ours, and it happens as the culmination of many systems coming into better balance, not as the result of any single magic intervention. The weight may come off first from places we didn't even know were storing it, and only later, when deeper metabolic healing has occurred, does the center begin to change. This understanding transforms the experience of pursuing health. It removes the arbitrary timelines, the comparison to others whose bodies follow different patterns, the sense of failure when results don't match expectations despite genuine effort. Instead, it invites us into a more mature relationship with our physical selves, one where we acknowledge that we are working with biology, with systems that have their own intelligence, their own reasons for doing what they do. We can influence these systems, we can support them, optimize conditions, remove obstacles, but we cannot simply command them to perform according to our wishes and timelines. And perhaps there is wisdom in this constraint, this reminder that we are not separate from nature, but part of it, subject to its patterns and rhythms even as we work to shape our health and our lives. The belly that holds onto its fat while the rest of us grows lighter is teaching patience, teaching respect for process, teaching that transformation happens at multiple levels, and not all of them are immediately visible. It is teaching us, if we are willing to learn, that health is not merely about appearance or numbers, but about the deep, invisible work of bringing systems into harmony, of creating conditions where the body can do what it is already longing to do, release what no longer serves, heal what needs healing, and find its way back to balance.